Mission 2. Roll Call. There was a considerable amount of buzz when it was announced that David Hayter wouldn't be reprising his role as Big Boss in Ground Zeroes, and by extension the Phantom Pain. Instead, he was replaced by veteran actor Kiefer Sutherland, with Kojima's reason being that he wanted an actor who could emote via motion capture. He also figured that he'd be a better fit for dramatic reasons. In most incarnations that David Hayter has played Snake, he's come across as cartoony, comical, goofy. Whatever word you want to describe him as, it's not the way a real person would talk. Given the way the series hinges itself on camp, however, it's not as though it ever felt out of place. Hayter's hammy performance helped give the character and the series at large a distinct identity. Metal Gear is also a series that, originally made in Japanese, I actually quite prefer in English thanks to Hayter and many of the other longtime voice actors like Christopher Randolph. Not to say that Akio Otsuka or the rest of the Japanese cast is bad, but Hayter always just nailed the series' tone so well that it's almost impossible to picture anyone else voicing Snake. It's fair to say that it was a big gamble that Kojima and Konami took by replacing Hayter, and I'm sorry to say they may have hit the lever without thinking. Sutherland is a much more expensive actor, or so everybody claims. He also hasn't had a lot of time in the role for fans to adjust. It's not to say Sutherland does a bad job. He's a fine actor, but he's given very little to work with. Big Boss rarely speaks in this game and has a very narrow range of emotions compared to his old self. I guess I can sympathize though. It wasn't uncommon to hear Solid Snake or Big Boss get flustered, act cocky, hit on women, or express excitement over things that really shouldn't have been that impressive to them. Sutherland isn't the problem here. It's the script and the direction. While I would prefer to hear Hayter in his place, it wouldn't help all that much. Plus, I really couldn't imagine him delivering a line like, "I won't scatter your sorrow to the heartless sea." When the tone got serious enough, like with the ending of Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake would often stop talking rather than spout some dramatic line tailor-made to sell the game as something it's not. This worked out well, and I always took it to mean that he was the type who, despite his many strengths, didn't know how to handle a situation with that kind of emotional weight. When faced with tragedy, remorse, uncertainty, death, betrayal, and other hilarious things like that, some people simply shut down, or in Snake's case, shut up. It adds another bit of depth to his character, and seeing his upbeat, chatty personality momentarily silenced was effective because it shook things up considerably. Doesn't really work as well when he's silent for 95% of this game, does it? Revolver Ocelot is played by Troy Baker, who's voiced countless other video game characters in his time. He even played my favorite Tales series protagonist, Yuri Lowell. You know, the one who has a balanced personality, very little angst, has no problems murdering villains, and isn't this stupid asshole. Baker is also a great actor, but Ocelot himself seems to be an entirely different character this time. I was baffled to see him and Snake on such good terms with each other, even lacking any sense of friendly rivalry. Unlike previous games where he was at his best either torturing people, shooting people, or being out of his mind, Baker's Ocelot acts as a voice of reason and as a voice of exposition. He doesn't seem at all like the guy who said that torture was
the ultimate form of expression.
Robin Atkin Downes returns as Kazuhira Miller, or Kaz, so it's good to see him back. With the exception of 2 scenes though, one of which I'll get into later, he's mostly just as angry, rasping, and serious as everybody else. He's actually the most bitter of all the main characters, although less awkward sounding about it than in Ground Zeroes.
Come on, start talking, bitch!
Kaz is the one who seems to be the most invested in getting revenge for the events of Ground Zeroes, so he at least comes across as motivated, much more so than Snake for some reason. Along with Ocelot, he's always the one giving Snake missions, finding leads on Skullface, giving speeches to the troops. He may as well be the real leader of the Diamond Dogs. Also, I'm getting a bit of a Trey Parker South Park vibe from his voice acting sometimes.
The deadliest enemy's right here in our midst. And they will get no mercy.
Christopher Randolph again reprises his role as every male in the Emmerich family, in this case, Huey. He's probably the one character who's the most intact as far as mannerisms and character go, but Huey's a whole can of worms I'll get into later as well. He may be my favorite character in the game, and I feel incredibly dirty for saying that. Our main villain is named Skullface, and no, that's not a joke. Nor is it also a nickname from my childhood that haunts me to this very day. The other kids never called me Skullface, alright?
'Cause there were no other kids.
Oh, that sounds a little bit scarier than it actually is. It was just because I was homeschooled. You know, after my whole family died of radiation poisoning. In all honesty though, James Horan does a good job with the material he's given, for the most part. We don't really see a lot of Skullface in the game, and I'm not terribly fond of this character for reasons I'll expand upon too, but at least his voice is great. Code Talker is my favorite new addition to the cast, being a very atypical character in the form of an elderly Navajo parasitologist. He's played by actor and writer Jay Tavare. It's sort of unfortunate that we get him a bit late in the game, and a lot of his dialogue amounts to scientific technobabble, but he has his moments at least. He's just a nice change of pace from the usual scientist stereotype in these games, although I don't think he's nearly as fun as Doctor.
Indeed, indeed. These splatter films are big in Germany, Russia, Japan, everywhere.
Quiet is played by Stephanie Justin, and she says almost nothing the entire game. Code Talker is my favorite new addition to the cast, being a very atypical character in the form of... Oh god, there's a spider on the wall. Let's freak out. Actually, no, let's just do... Problem solved.